Welcome back to another video on Gearsaw Studios, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build yourself castle walls as part 1 of my castle tutorial. You can see it's very large and we have room for a castle inside, but also we have some very detailed little towers here and some mathematically accurate walls here. So that way they look really cool. You can build them on any level of terrain. Notice how I did not even have to flatten this. And it's not terribly expensive, you just need a lot of stone bricks, which you can get with cobblestone generators and haste 2 beacons. So without further ado, let's investigate how we'd go about this. Starting out, we have ourselves a nice large area. It does not need to be super flat. In fact, you could do this on a hillside, like right over there, depending on the size of your place, could be fine if it weren't for that floating island. It's completely fine to have a lot of stairs in it. However, you might want to have elevated platforms so not the whole thing is stairs. But for this, I'm going to be going with a flat area. And it does not have to be completely flat. You can see right here, we have a little bit of variance, completely fine. And now, I've marked out the area with some stone bricks. And now, we need to make sure we know exactly what areas we're using. So let's mark some of them with a little bit taller stuff. So right here, let's say this one, and then you can see we have a tower. Let's do it like that, where we have a few of them be taller, and then at some point, we need an area to be completely flat for the castle gate. We can also use this castle design if we want to have a whole village surrounding that, so keep it in mind. For now, just build some areas that you'd say, I want to connect to this, and then establish an area that you could use for a gate. With a side chosen for our entrance, now we need to of course connect the walls. I didn't actually mark which ones I want to use since I'm just going to wing it, but we have two options. If you're on Java Edition, you could just use world edit like this, / line, and then add stone bricks. And of course, that works perfectly fine if you have access to that. However, if you don't have access to those tools, then you can use a link in the description to get them anyways. What we want to do is insert some distance formula stuff into this calculator. In other words, you can just look at the screen and you'll find everything you need, and you can make any shape of walls you want. If you get something that looks something like this where it's almost 45 but it's not perfectly diagonal, change it to be perfectly diagonal if possible. Then we do this all around as needed, and eventually we'll have something really interesting to work with. With our shape here, you can see how we have a general idea of how we want it to look. It's vaguely shaped like an octagon, but not really, and that's completely fine. And this also means our castle is probably not going to take up the majority of the walled area, which gives us a little bit of room to do other things. Maybe we want to have some courtyards and things like that. Since making a castle this large would be absolutely insane, however, we can make the castle area more grand by incorporating things like flowers and gardens. Thus, we just need to build the walls, completely unrelated. And how we do this? Of course, we have our pillars. This is where we want to put it. And we also need to determine how tall the wall is going to be. I think this is a good height. For reference, this is 10 blocks. And yeah, generally that should work. We also need a little bit of a tower for each segment. And of course, this is the gate. And our wall is not going to be 1 block thick. That would be kind of ineffective. So instead, we're going to make it 3 blocks thick at minimum. And of course, the more you do, the more expensive it gets, but fortunately, if you just have silk touch and a beacon, you can get all of the stone very quickly. So we have all this, and now we need to build a tower, and we need some measurements for that, so let's surround it something like this, maybe 9 by 9, and then of course 7 by 7 interior space, stuff like that. And let's build a simple rectangle for that. Now we have our 7 by 7 pillars, mostly placed on every time the direction changes, although sometimes they're too close, then I just removed them or added them elsewhere. And we can see they're roughly evenly spaced, not perfect, but still pretty decent. And now we need to work on some of the basic things about them. We need to give them fancy tops, and pretty much the only blocks in contender for this, if you're using stone bricks, is of course more stone bricks or andesite. I'm going to stick with andesite for this, and you want them to go up, things like that, and we add some on the corners, then we go here, things like that. we want to give them a little bit of a spiked top. We can make them rounded or we can make the corners taller. It's up to you on the specifics. And then we'll incorporate some windows later on. However, our biggest goal is, of course, with these now in place. By the way, if you want to connect the walls together, which by the way you should, you can add little entrances like this. I don't recommend actually adding a door though, so I'd get rid of that. But something like this will work completely fine. The walls themselves are going to have to be 3 blocks thick, and then their walkways will be even thicker than that. So let's make it thick here, and then we go to the top, and we have to choose the block. What are we walking on? Personally, I'm going to choose spruce planks. It's not the most realistic block, but still, it'll work. And another thing, these 2 towers here at the gate are recessed by 1 block in order to make them incorporate better. By the way, I think they might be slightly misaligned. Nope, they aren't. But still, we have some spruce planks, we have this going to be 3 blocks thick, and we go around and connect them to each of the towers. We can also connect them on diagonals. And do not change it based off of the height variance. We want this very basic concept for now, and then we're going to spend a long time detailing it. After a mind-numbingly long time of building walls, aka just installing Axiom, building the walls and uninstalling it, still, we have something really nice coming together. Additionally, we have some towers. So let's discuss the towers first. You can see very, very fortified, and we have these tall pillars on either side with some of these big things at the top. These are called teeth. Remember, anytime you see a tower top that goes up and down, that is called teeth, and I will refer to them as such for the rest of the video. And now, we have this, and the pillars that go down. Notice we have these arches made of stairs, slabs, full block, and then some windows. And we also used more stairs because, engravings. Now, let's look at the inside. And this is just a template version, so that way I could copy it around. Each one will be made separately. So that way it actually works with unique entrances and such. Right here, entrance, stairs, more stairs. And then on the roof, we have more stairs. Yeah, recurring theme. And we have some lanterns. We could add ladders on these sides in order to get up to the top, or we could go down to another layer. Notice the spruce. And we have these little areas where you could shoot out. That way, if there's an attacker, you can repeatedly fire, and if they fire back, you can hide. Which makes this actually a really good thing for PvP. Unfortunately, if you're doing this for PvP, stone bricks would not be the best choice, but oh well. We have that, and then we also have these flags at the top. I chose Poland because Poland is pretty cool, and also just because, notice, 2 blocks. 2 block flags look much better than 3 blocks, and make sure they wave in the wind a little. And you can see, they're on every other tower, but both sides of the gate, which makes it not too overwhelming. Then, these walls. We start off with the little bridges. We thickened up the lines to 3 blocks, added more as needed, and then I extended a ton of stone bricks under them. It doesn't need to be solid, but make sure to light it up if you do so. Well, if you don't do so. But anyways, right here we have some stairs, and you can see they go up. We have full blocks, and then we have more of these teeth made of stairs and slabs. And this overall feels really nice, and it's actually pretty practical. If there was hypothetically a raid, you could fire down upon it, and the only thing that could really attack back would be an evoker, which makes this actually a really good thing for just general defense. And then at the bottom, let's fortify a little bit more with more stone bricks, stairs, slab, stair, and then this will make the walls even more imposing. Potentially you might want to add banners and such, however that gets increasingly difficult the more varied your wall shapes are. You can see right here, 45-degree angle, that would be tough, and even though we have some flat walls, we have some less than flat walls. Good luck building something on this. So it can be really difficult, but trust me, you can definitely try. And also remember, terracotta exists for those nice desaturated colors. Right here, I've now completed the towers and the wall's exterior, and we can see it's not the most interesting, but it looks very foreboding, it's menacing, stuff like that. And here's our final changes. On the bottoms of these towers, if they get too low due to uneven terrain, by the way, do that. You can see how we have a little bit of stone bricks to signify this is the bottom of the tower. You could add a bit of landscaping, but simply the scale of this build and the uneven terrain would probably make that look kind of silly, so I decided to pass on it. If you're doing a smaller one or one that's significantly more square, then that could definitely work. I also have some lanterns and barrels about in order to add a little bit of lighting and a little bit of character to this. Completed the roofs. You can see the floorings are now made with some spruce logs in order to spice it up. And generally, we just have something nice going on. Now, we have to go to the front. And we can see I blacked out the gate simply so I could post something funny on YouTube using this because, hey, I'm building a castle. Yeah, this is a very large build. Then we have these little teeth here, the smaller ones. This one does not use stairs, so that way it's just a little bit spikier. We have a taller point here, and then you can see how we have a small entrance. It's up to you whether you want to do a drawbridge or something like that, but I will say that if you want to do a drawbridge, then you definitely need to try some trapdoors on it. So here's an example design. Like this, of course, it goes up, replaces some of those stairs. If you want to add some more detail, we can add these trapdoors. And you can see how that works, makes it look a little bit more armored. So make sure to include small things like that and go through, make this gate. You could add a little bit of landscaping here, maybe a path, like some coarse dirt and podzol going outwards, like this is connecting to the rest of the kingdom. Like assume these walls are massively expanded, stuff like that. But yeah, we need the gate so that way we have a proper entrance to this place. Right here, we have the castle gate, and we have a few basic things. Of course, the path, we can see it is just some podzol and grass path surrounded by some coarse dirt. Because all the shadows casted by the podzol onto the grass path, because you know, it's constantly being interrupted, you can see how it's noticeably darker from up here. Although the path gets a little bit too thin as we go, still, if you make it go winding around through whatever kingdom you have, you know, expanding these walls, connecting them to other things, it'll look completely fine. But of course, make sure it actually corresponds to the size of the castle gate. And then we have some lanterns on some logs nearby. We walk forward. We have some engravings here with some stairs. The gate itself, notice we're using walls. Looks like vertical slabs here. It's very disorienting as an anti-vertical slabs person. Then we have some leaves here in order to sell the sense of scale. Look at how small these bushes are compared to the wall. Realistically, these towers should be slightly taller than the rest, but it's a little bit too late to do that. And then we have these little spikes here, now including walls, torches, and overall just having a little bit more variance to them. And now we have the inside here and my failed attempts of using World Edit to flatten this area. But anyways, here's what we need to do. We need a castle in here, but of course your walls need to be a little bit more than just a castle. We have the castle grounds, the gardens, things like that. And it doesn't need to be perfectly flat, but I think what's more important is instead of having it be flat, you just need it to have an even space. Like right here, we can see how it goes a little bit lower than the gate. That's not good. We need this whole area to be level. We can leave the hill in. In fact, the hill is a good thing because we can use it to sell the sense of scale. In fact, if you have a lone hill like this, of course, assuming the rest of the biome wasn't around it, you could potentially flatten the top, build the castle on top of it, and what do you know? You have a castle on a mountain, which makes it seem even larger than it is. We need to use the environment to our advantage, and we need to know what side the viewer is coming from. You might notice this subtly with my building tactics, where right here, the stairs face where I expect the viewer to be. I expect them to be viewing from the front, thus the stairs face them. So keep that in mind. What direction do you want the viewer to be standing in? As in, where are they most likely going to be coming from? We have all this flat area here, but that's water. We're not going to be coming from the water. Thus, we should use the golden ratio in order to build the smaller parts here and the bigger parts back there and have it facing to us right here. I know that's a lot of crazy mumbo jumbo stuff, but trust me, the hermit crafters use it. And, well, we are trying to build better here. So let's assume that we're going to be viewing the castle from this angle. We can't see the whole thing, but we can see some of it, and it should be more open on this side, and the back side of it should be coming from the water. So yeah, it's a lot to take in, but for now, flatten the area, make it a bit prettier, maybe a little bit of bone meal, remove some of the flowers, and then we can get down to business. Now, with this flatter area, we could begin building the castle, but of course this is part 1 on how to do it, because otherwise I wouldn't be uploading for a whole month, because of course interior, exterior, the dungeon, the grounds, there's a ton of things to talk about, And because I want to make sure that I'm explaining it correctly, we're going to have to cut it short here today. However, there's still a little bit more to do. First off, where we want the entrance, I already talked about where you want to angle the castle. We want it this direction. The viewer is going to be coming from here most likely. Well, we need the entrance to be big, so let's try a giant door and staircase. You can build it in a very similar style to the gate, but of course I'll make sure to cover it in part 2 as well. Additionally, just past the gate, you might notice some andesite and cyan terracotta on the ground to have a little bit of an area. Along with that, I added some stairs on the walls and statues made of tuff. So you can see they look pretty cool. We have this ground also looks pretty cool. It might be a little bit too different of a building style. You can see the high contrast from here. So it's up to you whether you want to try that massive cobblestone texture. But still, we really have something coming together, and well, you have castle walls. On the off chance you did not want to build a castle or already have a pre-existing one, well, this one will work completely fine for that purpose. And if you need a castle, well, stay tuned for next week. I'll be uploading that too. Either way, enjoy the rest of your day. Gearsaw out.